Hello and welcome to the Pembrokeshire Bird Diary. I'm Annie Haycock from the Pembrokeshire Bird Group, here to share the highlights of the last quarter of 2022. October continued the theme of warmth, the warmest October on record and the warmest year on record, and although we had average rainfall for the month, it wasn't enough to fill the reservoirs. Nevertheless, we had some interesting birds. The month started well with a common rosefinch that dropped in on Skocombe on the 1st and another that visited Porthgyn at the end of the month. This species has become an annual visitor, but only one or two each autumn. This was Ramsay's first barred warbler since 2018, in fact the first Pembrokeshire record since then. It's only ever been an occasional visitor. One melodious warbler is seen on one of the islands in most years. This year it was Skomer's turn. Yellow-browed warblers have become a regular visitor in recent years, with half a dozen or more recorded each autumn. It seems they are now breeding in Scandinavia, much further west than shown on this map. Great white egrets are being seen all through the year, but this is one of the few times two have been seen together. There was also a party of 6 flying southwest over Khyber on October the 20th. So, who knows, maybe they have plans for next year. Long-eared owls and masters are hiding amongst the branches. There are 1 or 2 records every few years, many of them on Skomer like this one. But then we had another one in Martintaven on the 19th of November, again quite difficult to see in a tangle of brown gorse stems. The bird of the year must surely be the Tennessee warbler that dropped in on Skocombe and showed itself well to the 4 ringers on the island. It's the first record for Wales, the 6th for Britain, and approximately the 18th for the Western Palearctic. News spread fast, and by the evening over 80 people had booked a place on a special boat for the following day. At one point, Dale Sailing had over 730 callers queued at their call centre. Thanks are due to Dale Sailing for dealing with so many calls and for making a boat available after the end of the Skomer visitor season. The warbler, however, had other ideas, and having been satisfactorily photographed, it wasn't seen again, so the boat was cancelled. Grey phalaropes proved a bit more accommodating. There had already been one at the Gann in September, then 4 passing Strumble Head, and finally this one on Pembroke Mill Pond in October. Great blackback gulls explore the world in their first year or 2 of life before drifting back towards their natal sites. We know there is interchange between Skocombe and Cornish birds. However, this one was seen near St David's on the 20th of October, having been ringed as a nestling 3 months earlier at Walney Island in Cumbria, but it had moved on to Cornwall by January 2023. October the 19th saw a huge influx of thrushes from the west. Ramsay reported counts of 620 fieldfares and 326 redwing in the space of 2 hours. During the rest of the day, 1,400 were reported at Trevine, 800 at 9 Wells, over 4,000 near St David's, nearly 3,500 on Skomer, and large numbers were arriving at dusk and overnight on Skocombe. A tremendous storm had been brewing over Ireland, and this had apparently caused the movement. Most of the birds seemed to head back west the following day, but large numbers, in the hundreds, were counted at a few inland sites over the next few days. Female and juvenile red-breasted flycatchers are pretty unobtrusive little brown birds. At least one individual is recorded in most years, and this one was at Porthclais on the 22nd and 23rd of October. The lesser whitethroat is another generally unobtrusive species, more likely to be heard singing in spring than seen at any other time. This one on Skocombe showed the characteristics of the Siberian race. Perhaps more interesting fact is that it was caught on consecutive days and showed a weight change from 10.7 grams to 11.5 grams as it took on fuel for the next stage of its migration. Allowing for the difference in average lifespan, that's roughly the equivalent of a human gaining a stone, or 6 kilograms, in 3 weeks. We don't see many ring ousels in Pembrokeshire. However, a minimum of 14 birds were recorded this October, including 7 at Porthgyn on the 29th. We tend to think of the breeding season being the spring and summer months, but at least one species still has young in the nest in October. But now, at the end of the month, the last few storm petrels on Skocombe are close to fledging. Migration continued into November. Mostly it was the regular species coming from further north, such as willow warblers, redstarts and swallows on Skocombe, and wheatears at Stromble Head. We perhaps think of widgeon as winter visitors, but the Wetland Bird Survey shows that numbers peak here in November, so some at least are passing migrants. Those that move on in December may go to places like the Somerset Levels, where the peak count is usually in January, or they could head on to Ireland or mainland Europe. The Webb's count also showed some newer arrivals, such as this ringneck duck at Rosebush Reservoir, though it may well be the same one as in previous winters. But the keen ears and eyes of our Skocombe wardens picked out the unusual. At dusk on November 13th, a small brown bird exploded from the bracken along the lighthouse track and was immediately identified by Giselle as an olive-backed pipit. Fortunately, Richard agreed and managed to capture the supporting evidence with his trusty camera. There has been one previous Skocombe record of an olive-backed pipit. The first for Britain was in fact found around the cottage garden between the 14th and 18th of April 1948. This year's bird was one of 8 recorded across the UK in November, but could it have been the same bird that spent part of December in Exmouth in Devon? 2 days later, and another brief sighting of a pipit. This time its call identified it as a Richard's pipit. It wasn't about to stay around for a mugshot, though. There have been approximately 29 previous Skocombe birds, 6 of them in Richard and Giselle's time, but only one has been seen on the ground, and that in torrential rain, so it's just as well it has a distinctive call. Another sighting on November the 29th was a similarly frustrating brief view of a bird in flight, perhaps the same bird that had been keeping its head down. After a run of records from 2009 to 2017, bitterns have again become sporadic visitors to the county. This was the only one seen here in 2022. Of course, there were plenty of gulls around, and on 18th of November there was a decent selection at the Gan, including at least 20 Mediterranean gulls, of which 5 sported colour rings. 3 of these had been seen there before, but 2 were new. And then there was this one at Goodwick. Yellow ATTZ was hatched and ringed in Germany in 2019, came to Britain that autumn, and then went right back across Europe to join a breeding colony in Czechia by the spring of 2021, and then all the way back to Britain for winter 2022. Definitely a well-travelled bird. Also at Goodwick, this juvenile Arctic tern hung around for a week or so, and was last photographed on the 27th of November, by far the latest date for the species in Pembrokeshire. After 15 months of warmer than average temperatures across Britain, December overall was cooler but drier and sunnier compared to the 1991 to 2020 long-term averages. So conditions were still good for migration, with swallows reported from Lanarkshire and Skocombe on the 1st and 3rd. And a yellow-browed warbler on Skocombe on the 3rd was the last scarce bird before Richard and Giselle left on the 10th. Most of the Brent geese seen in Pembrokeshire are from the pale-bellied race that breeds in Canada, and we know this from the Irish ringing programme. However, occasionally we also get dark-bellied birds, which come from the northeast. These two spent most of the month at the Newgale campsite, obviously realising it was a good spot for a holiday. At the other end of the scale, jack snipe are usually difficult to see, being small, well camouflaged and mostly active at night. A trail cam at Martinshaven for 3 weeks recorded them on several nights. The Tivy ringing group has been catching redwings during the past few years, and a total of 4 birds have been recovered so far. The most recent of these was shot in Almeria, Spain, earlier this month. Of the others, one was shot in Italy, another in France, and one flew into a window in Devon. Well, that completes the roundup of the birding highlights for 2022. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll look out for the next edition.